All right, let's get right into it. For decades, this was one of the Cold War's most closely guarded secrets, a biological weapons program of absolutely staggering size, operating in direct violation of international law, all while hidden in plain sight. This is the story of the Soviet Union's secret arsenal. So, the whole secret really started to unravel with this one single, stunning admission from the Russian president, Boris Yeltsin. In 1992, he came right out and confirmed what Western intelligence had suspected for years but could never, ever prove, that a massive, illegal bioweapons program was real. And that confirmation, of course, brings up a huge question, one that really frames our entire look into this today. How on earth did a program of this scale stay hidden for so long, right under the nose of the entire world? To get to the bottom of that, we first have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the deception. I mean, it was a masterclass in duplicity, built on a foundation of public promises and very secret betrayals. And this is what's so wild. Just look at the timeline here. On one side, you have the public promise, 1972. The Soviet Union signs the Biological Weapons Convention, joining a global ban. But then, just 1 year later, in total secret, the Politburo approves a top-secret decree to launch a new offensive program that would completely dwarf everything that came before it. But you know, that massive deception in the 1970s didn't just pop up out of thin air. To really understand it, we've got to go back to the program's origins, a foundation that was laid decades earlier, born from the trauma of war and disease. You see, the program's roots go way, way back to 1928. After suffering these devastating epidemics during World War I and the Russian Civil War, the new Soviet government was determined to weaponize disease. Now, this early program had its share of setbacks, including a deadly lab accident with plague that forced them to move away from Moscow. Eventually, they reestablished major test sites like the incredibly isolated Aralsk-7 facility on Vozrozhenaya Island. And, well, this table here gives you a pretty chilling look at what they were cooking up. This first generation of Soviet bioweapons wasn't anything exotic. It was based on familiar, naturally occurring germs. We're talking about the agents for anthrax, pneumonic plague, and even smallpox, diseases that have haunted humanity for centuries, now being systematically weaponized. Okay, but then, by the late 1960s, the whole program was in trouble. It was stagnating, losing momentum, and the reason it was failing was a deep, self-inflicted wound right inside the Soviet scientific establishment itself. I mean, things got so bad that the program was seen as a total dead end. It just wasn't producing any breakthroughs, and some high-ranking military commanders were actually ready to pull the plug on the whole thing, thinking that nuclear weapons had made biological ones obsolete anyway. And the root of this failure? It boils down to this really bizarre and, frankly, destructive ideology called Lysenkoism. For decades, the Soviet state totally rejected modern genetics. Instead, they promoted Trofim Lysenko's politically approved junk science. This crippled Soviet biology, leaving its scientists a whole generation behind their Western counterparts in the new field of molecular biology. But you know, this scientific backwardness, it actually created the perfect opening for one man, a brilliant and totally ruthless scientist, to revive the bioweapons program and reshape all of Soviet science in the process. Enter a guy named Yuri Ovchinnikov. He was a rising star in Soviet chemistry, a full academician, and a scientific advisor to the Politburo. He saw that genetics gap and knew there was really only one way to get the state to pour massive resources into closing it, by appealing to the military. This quote from the man himself really says it all. Ovchinnikov knew the Soviet system inside and out. Asking for money for medicine or pure research would go nowhere, but the promise of a powerful new weapon? Oh yeah, that would unlock unlimited funding. So what did he do? He played the military card. He warned the leadership that the United States, even though they'd officially ended their program, was secretly using these revolutionary new genetic engineering techniques to create unstoppable supergerms. Now, it was a lie, but it worked. He framed a massive investment in biotechnology as a vital matter of national security. And the result? A green light to launch a second-generation program. This new effort was way larger, far more secretive, and infinitely more dangerous than anything that had come before. And it was all powered by that very genetic engineering Ovchinnikov had pushed for. So now, the program's focus completely shifted. They started working with rare, deadly viruses like Marburg, and they even developed agents specifically designed to cripple an enemy's agriculture, like foot and mouth disease. And this right here, this is where things get truly terrifying. It wasn't just about stockpiling existing germs anymore. Now, Soviet scientists were actively re-engineering life itself to be more lethal. They created strains of plague that were resistant to multiple antibiotics, and they even had plans to make smallpox deadlier, maybe by splicing in genes from hemorrhagic viruses. They were building a doomsday arsenal.
So, how do you hide all of this? Well, you build an incredibly complex and compartmentalized system. You can see a bit of it here. The centerpiece was this sprawling civilian agency called BioPreparet. On paper, it was a network of pharmaceutical and research institutes, all developing vaccines and medicines, but in reality, it was just an elaborate cover for a top-secret military program with thousands of scientists whose real job was creating and producing biological weapons.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all Cold War history. Why does it still matter today? Well, because the story didn't end with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The secrets, the facilities, and the weaponized pathogens, they never fully went away. Because after that brief moment of honesty under Boris Yeltsin in 1992, the official story in Russia started to change, big time. The admission of an offensive program was completely walked back. The new narrative, which they stick to today, is that the Soviet Union's research was purely defensive and always followed international law. The confession was just erased. Here's the kicker. Those military-run institutes at the very heart of the weapons program were never open to international inspectors. The weaponized strains they created were never cataloged or publicly destroyed. To this day, these facilities are just as secretive and closed off as they were at the height of the Cold War. And that lingering secrecy became a whole lot more concerning in 2012. In a major article, Vladimir Putin himself wrote about developing future weapon systems based on new principles, and he specifically included genetic technology on that list, calling them more acceptable than nuclear arms. And look, this isn't just some vague concept. Russia's own Ministry of Defense encyclopedia gives a definition for genetic weapons, describing them as agents, maybe viral, capable of damaging a person's hereditary material. The very idea that Ovchinnikov used to launch a secret program in the 70s now has an official definition in modern Russian military doctrine. And all of that leaves us with one really unsettling question. The first generation was based on natural germs. The second was built on genetic engineering. With all the old recipes and weaponized cultures still locked away in secret labs, could a third, even more advanced generation of these weapons already be in the works